Well, welcome everyone. It's March, and before we go any further, we wanted to just quickly announce that our decision for our Monday calls. We decided that it'll be good for us to commit to at least first Monday of every month. Okay, first Monday. And you know us, you know me, I miss you guys. So then I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna get on. So I might do something like that. But let's make that commitment for one another. We will show up, and if you can put it on your calendar, we will do our very best not to miss a single one of those. So it'll be first Monday of every month. Okay. So the next month will be when I'm doing the moon cycle journey, sacred journey with some of you, and hopefully many of you can join me. But so I think it's like the 4th or something like that, somewhere there. Okay. So and this month I have several interviews are coming up. One is with John Burgos next Monday. So if you didn't see that on the email, please check that back and then sign up if you haven't signed up. I linked the recording from the last recording or the interview that I had with April, who's the John Burgos' assistant. So that's there. And also I have an interview with Tammy. And this is a pretty big one too, because she interviews a lot of very, very interesting and beautiful souls. I'm so delighted and honored to be a part of her interview series this year. So that's going to be next week on I can't remember the exact dates. I think the 17th or something like that. I think, yeah, 17th.
That's right.
And okay, good. And it's live, so please join and you can ask questions. It's not a Zoom screen, it's just a phone call, I believe. So, but you can raise your hand and ask me questions there too. And I'm sure I will have other things to announce, and there'll be several more interviews coming up this month and early next month. And I also have a podcast interview that I did last year on race. Basically, this is a podcast through the Shift Network, and it's about addressing the racial issues and bigotry, discriminations, and things like that. And I was interviewed in that last year, but it'll air this month. I haven't received the link yet, but that's getting rendered, and they're making it cohesive with my voice and the historical background of when I moved to the United States and other commentaries as well. So that will be emailed to you when that becomes available. That's a pretty raw interview for me to talk about racism and the childhood that I had. It's still very, very raw for me at times. So, I haven't listened to the whole thing after they have created a full podcast with it. So I'm very curious to listen to it myself. And there'll be other ones too, but I also wanted to mention that Chris and I had a long discussion, and he can chime in about this, but about how do we show up to the current situations, but to everyday life, because you can have the vision, but if you don't take the action, that becomes the nightmare, right? That's the Japanese proverb that we have. So you can take actions without vision, but that's just I'm sorry, it's taking an action without the vision. Is that right, Chris? That becomes a nightmare. So we want to take actions, but with the clear vision of how do we show up as human beings? How do we show up as kind of a messenger of peace, but not to ignore the darkness of our lives as well? I personally don't want to just be the leader or the spokesperson for the light and ascension, and also to reach for something better and more, and improving constantly, because that is not realistic. That is not what nature is. The nature has cycles, and we also have cycles that live with. Our spirits really yearn to be a part of the natural cycles. So we want to be the voice, the spokesperson for people, for the whole, the darkness, the light, the sadness, the joy. And I will not sit here and just say, hey, only thing we need is love and happiness. I don't tend to gravitate towards the books that write all about how to get happiness and how to be happy and how to search for happiness. Those are not my go-to books at all. In fact, I have never read a book cover to cover on those topics, because it's just not, to me, that's not the full spectrum of human beings. We're so much more than that. And one last thing I want to mention. Oh, and then so therefore, Chris and I decided, after long discussions over the weekend and in the past almost 2 weeks or so, we've been going back and forth about this. How do we show up? How do we have the vision of taking the role of holding wide emotions and the depth of the ocean and the stormy weather, as well as stillness and placid lakes, and all the beauty that we have, and the disgust at the same time? How do we show up to this community? We decided that I talked to Chris about maybe having him lead us the zikr practice, which is the Sufi practice for singing and vocalizing prayers. So maybe Chris can say a few things about this, but we will be sending you the emails on that practice that we will be doing on Saturday, this coming Saturdays. And you just heard, you maybe read a little bit on our email, but we haven't created the full post yet. So we will send that email out today or tomorrow. So Chris, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of the things with everything that's going on in the world right now, what has continued to hit us is the need to just be together as human beings and to acknowledge what's happening internally first, what's happening in our lives, in our hearts, in our minds, what is being stirred up in us as we observe what's happening in the world, even if it seems far away. But we live in a time now where even if it's far away, it still impacts us more than we might have ever thought before. And so for that reason, this particular practice that Masami was just talking about, it's a very old practice. It's one that has become very familiar in the Sufi tradition. Similar things exist in other traditions, but it's using the voice. It's using our own human voice to activate the energy and the power and the healing of our hearts. And when that is turned on, it's something that we can offer not just to ourselves, but outwardly to the world. And so what we thought we would also do is take this opportunity of gathering together, and we're calling it Prayers for Peace. And I actually think it is ready to put up. So I'm going to post the link in case anybody wants to get started. We've set it up so that it's a donation-based event starting at $5, and 100% of the proceeds are going to go to supporting refugees from global conflicts. And so we'll have more information about that at the event, but you can learn more about that on the link I just posted up. And for those of you that had a question earlier about Masami's program for reclaiming your moon power, I saw a question on the chat there from Linda. I went ahead and put in the link to that as well, if that's something that you hadn't seen yet. So
and we will talk more about that in the coming weeks, because I definitely want to tap into that conversations about the rhythm of the darkness and the moon cycles. So I will take extra time some other time outside of the Monday call to invite you to have discussions around this before the 1 month program starts on April 1st. So
can I get us started with just a quick invitation to blessing? Mm-hmm. Because this is something.
Could you say a little bit more about the word blessings?
I'm
Yeah.
going to, well, I'll say a little bit more about, so I've been doing a lot of just contemplation, and you could say study on blessing and what blessings are in our lives. And I keep coming back to the work of John O'Donohue, who is probably one of the better known writers of blessings, at least in the current era. But one of the things that is so important about this idea of blessing is that it goes back to a couple of things that we really lack in our society today. And one is ritual pause. So creating sacred space where we can actually take in all that's happening, the changes that are happening, the transformations. It's a little bit what our Monday calls have become, in a sense. They've sort of become this ritual pause for us to come together. But it's something that we really, really don't practice very well, at least not in modern Western societies in general. Perhaps there are other places that still have elements of that tradition that they still honor and respect more, but it's really become lost. And so the idea of a blessing is something that it's a very old word, and it goes back to making something sacred. Okay, that I won't get into all the etymologies of it today, but it has to do with making something sacred and recognizing it for being sacred. And what we forget to do so much is to actually look at our ordinary daily lives as just that. Because we don't have to talk about only special events and occasions, even though that's important too. And it's important that we have times that we pause and acknowledge rites of passage and transitions, all of those things that mark and change the shape of our lives. But it's also important that we have this kind of mindset, this approach to daily living that involves blessing. And that's something that really impacted me from reading John O'Donohue's work, is that he says we really need to learn how to bless each other again, because that's been lost. And so that's something that for me, that's becoming, that's my commitment, is to work from that place when we come together and when we offer things. And so Masami and I today, we've collected a few pieces that, some poems and other things that have struck us in the last few days and week, as we've been witnessing all that's been unfolding in the world. And so we're going to share some of those, and we'll also invite some comments from all of you, and just to hear from you where you are right now. What are you feeling as all of these things, war and conflict here, there, and everywhere, is showing up? So we want to acknowledge that and be with that together. Again, the sense that we want to leave with is being human together, and being seen and being heard, being witnessed if we have something to say and share, and know that we're not alone in this. So I want to just read a very quick one of John O'Donohue's blessings. That now he has this as a waking in the morning type of blessing, but I think it's something that if we can take this feeling into our days, it can really change our sense of possibility, because we forget that each day, Masami and I were just saying this as we went to bed last night, it's like, can you believe that we're going to wake up to a completely different day tomorrow, full of things that we can't even imagine or predict?
And maybe too, maybe we'll wake up tomorrow morning. And I think that's also important. There's no guarantee in that. Yeah.
That's right. Some people, many people that went to sleep last night didn't wake up this morning. And so we have to remember that and remember them too. So I'm going to read this.
Okay, could you post that blessings, or did you find it?
This one I'm not posting. I'm just going to read this short one, and then I'll come back to the longer one later.
Okay.
This is one of the matins from John O'Donohue's book, To Bless the Space Between Us. He says, I arise today In the name of silence, womb of the word. In the name of stillness, home of belonging. In the name of the solitude of the soul and the earth, I arise today. Blessed by all things, wings of breath, delight of eyes, wonder of whisper, intimacy of touch, eternity of soul, urgency of thought, miracle of health, embrace of God. May I live this day, compassionate of heart, clear in word, gracious in awareness, courageous in thought, generous in love. And with that blessing, we were reminded yesterday that in times of crisis, in times of hardship and trauma, that our natural default is to drop into our survival mode. And survival mode comes with a scarcity mind. And so that the antidote to that is to turn it inside out and actually give and share and be generous. And that's something that we can all take into our day. So I'll pause there and hand it back to Masami, and we'll just let this flow today.
Maybe we can go into the little bit about the generosity of the space of sharing. And I think during the conflicts and wars and uncertainties and difficulties and challenges, what helps all of us to heal our wounds and the traumas, and we're not talking about your own traumas, but we're talking the earthly level traumas, that it's in the soil, it's in the stardust, it's in the air, it's in the water. Like we all swim in that, the water of traumas. And what's going on in Europe is, for many of you, it just brings back kind of ancestral old memories. And some of you is not even old. For instance, somebody like for my mom, who went through the war in Japan, but then my parents lived in Bulgaria during the height of the Cold War. And my mom was pregnant with me in Bulgaria, and she rushed back to Japan at 7 months pregnant so that she would not have me. She didn't know at that point that I was going to be a boy or a girl. So she just needed to leave that country to come back to Japan to have me, so that I don't have to serve in the Bulgarian military when I turned 18. But it's those things are in our genetic codes. It's in our DNA. So what's happening all across the world, but particularly we're right now talking about what's happening in Ukraine and in Russia. It brings back the cellular memories in us, because we have undigested, unprocessed, unintegrated. We're not integrating our past traumas, because once it's integrated, it can become our fuel for courage, and it can become our healing tools, but we haven't done enough of that. I felt that when I first went to Berlin in early 90s. So it was just a few years after the wall came down. And I felt the integration not being quite done. I could feel the line from the East and the West, and the lack of connections, or the coming together. I did not feel that when I went there. And it's a very difficult thing, because how do we get started on how do we integrate these histories that are sometimes world apart, but shared history also. So there's a lot that will be coming up for you. So what generosity means is that generous heart to listen to both sides, generous heart to listen to many different perspectives, and not to. So I think the radical thing for us to take, a radical thing for us to do right now is not to take sides, but to stand in that storm and be still, be grounded, rooted, and be able to see and say there are traumas in both sides. You look at Russia's history for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, and the history, the dark human history of the traumas that all across Europe, all across the world has been going through. I think we can really feel that. And that's what it is to have a generous heart. That's what it is to start healing each other from that place of willingness to listen and to hear. And it's been tough for me because immediately I went into black and white mode. This is the right way to think. This is the wrong way to think. And to look at what what certain countries or the ideas that are coming in and say, I can never agree to this act of terror and act of horror, versus I will support these group of people. It's like I went into the duality myself. But this is when I was reminded of the poem from Thich That Hanh that I'm going to have Chris share. It's a very difficult poem, everyone. But I believe that as sensitives, empaths, intuitives, the light workers, the people that are showing up to these calls are all the people that are looking to elevate all our consciousness together. We need to have the courage and the strength enough to really look into the human darkness as well, because the subconsciousness is being melting down and it's getting woken up because we're becoming more conscious. That's the key, right? We're becoming more conscious. That's why our subconsciousness is starting to surface. That's what we're experiencing. That's what we're seeing right now. Good, bad, and ugly all coming up. So I'm going to have Chris share that poem so he can read that. And then after that, maybe we could go into the blessings and the meditation.
Yeah, and I want to say a couple of things on just following what Masami just said. With everything that's happening, it's very easy to jump to condemnation or taking sides. And sometimes it's more clear-cut than others. I'm reminded right now of when I was in high school in Toronto in the mid-90s, when, I'm giving you my age there, but early to mid-90s, when the Balkan region was breaking up and falling into war. And so many people from my high school actually left, boys left, Serbs, Croats, Muslims. They left to fight for these new identified countries, and several of them were killed. And it was very hard to know where to stand because these were all people that I had known and had gone to school with. And to have suddenly seeing them on 3 different sides of a conflict was very strange and confusing. And I think that we're in that mode right now because there's so much interchange and connection between the worlds that are in conflict right now. We're just a ripple away. It may not be direct in the United States where we are, and I know not everybody here is in the United States that's listening, but even here, we're just a ripple away. Some of you are much closer. Some of you may even be right there. And so it's we have to recognize the brutality that these conflicts impose on everyone, whether it's economic or it's the actual violence of war, or the traumatic impact that it has not knowing what's coming. So I'm going to read this poem from Thich That Hanh that he wrote in the aftermath of the Vietnam War. It's a well-known piece, and it really is about him struggling as Thich That Hanh with people coming to him for help and encouragement and support, and writing letters to him telling about the horrors that they had experienced or that their families had gone through or people that they knew. And he was really just trying to hold what it meant to be human all together, with all of those pieces together. And that's really the origin of this piece. So I'm going to share it on my screen here so that you can see it a little more easily. Okay. So this piece is called Please Call Me by My True Names. Don't say that I will depart tomorrow. Even today, I'm still arriving. Look deeply. Every second, I am arriving to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with still fragile wings, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. I am the mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks, and I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands. And I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm, it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast, it fills the 4 oceans. Please, call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and my laughter at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up, and so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion.
Thank you, Chris. Let's go into the meditation, and we welcome you to, after the meditation, let's just share I think that's what we need, is sharing of our own emotions without judgments. If you are feeling hatred, that's what I welcome you to share. If you're feeling a sense of overwhelm, that's what I welcome you to share. If you are feeling a sense of hope, because maybe you read some hopeful news today, that's what I want you to share. We hold many faces, and as collective, we should be able to hold many faces, many names within ourselves and within in the group and in the society. So it's when we get fragmented, when we're not being heard, when our own feelings are not being welcomed, just to be heard, that's when we dig deeper into our scar tissues and make it harder for us to heal as collective, as individuals. So that's what we're trying to bring into the group, is the compassion, but it's the generosity of listening. And so whatever you are feeling, whatever you're going through, it doesn't have to be the world event. Maybe it's something you're going through individually, or things that have come up from the past. Whatever that might be, it's fine. I'm going to have Chris read the blessings that we talked about before getting on the call. I think that's the one that you have, right? So he's going to read this, and if you can kind of still your heart beat to, so that it's not beating too fast or too slow, just kind of creating a nice rhythm, okay? And sit in your seat of who you are. Be proud of who you are. Be courageous as who you are. Be loving as who you are in this moment, and receive these blessings that he will read. Make this into a meditation, and we'll sit together in silence afterwards for a few minutes. I will probably interject a couple of guided imagery and thoughts, and then maybe we can share after that. So
I wanted to add to that what we were going to talk about in this bigger theme today is the power of collective fragility. And it's a strange image. This is Masami's creative capacity coming alive here for us. But this idea of the power of collective fragility it is a very powerful thing to think about, how vulnerable each one of us is and how much we feel that in our own lives. And yet when we can come together and recognize that when there are things that are fragile around us, whether it's a newborn baby or a precious piece of glasswork or something, it could be anything at all. It could be something you just picked up from nature, and it's maybe it's ice crystals that are beautiful one moment and they're melting the next. But when we cherish something, when we open ourselves to it, and when we are generous with the offering of our own love outward, that fragility that we share becomes something that we all can feel and come together and actually strengthen ourselves with and take courage from. And so that's the piece I'm going to share. This is another John O'Donohue piece, and it's called For Courage. So it's a blessing for us to be in our place of courage. When the light around you lessens, and you might even want to close your eyes as I begin reading this, just settle in and feel your body, feel where you might have tension right now, where you might feel hurt or tension or vulnerability. This is for all of those feelings. When the light around you lessens and your thoughts darken until your body feels fear turn cold as stone inside. When you find yourself bereft of any belief in yourself, and all you knowingly leaned on has fallen. When one voice commands your whole heart and it is raven dark, steady yourself and see that this is your own thinking that darkens your world. Search and you will find a diamond thought of light. Know that you are not alone and that this darkness has a purpose. Gradually, it will school your eyes to find the one gift your life requires, hidden within this night corner. Invoke the learning of every suffering you have suffered. Close your eyes. Gather all the kindling about your heart to create one spark. That is all you need to nourish the flame that will cleanse the dark of its weight of festered fear. A new confidence will come alive to urge you towards higher ground, where your imagination will learn to engage difficulty as its most rewarding threshold. A new confidence will come alive to urge you towards higher ground, where your imagination will learn to engage difficulty as its most rewarding threshold.
So let's continue to take slow breaths, sipping on the breaths and fully exhaling. Today, use your mouth and blow out from your mouth between your lips, like you're blowing out a candle. Breathing in, breathing out. Begin to emphasize your exhales. Because the exhales help us to release, remove, restore our nervous system, our balance, and you may be able to find your equanimity that way. And just as many of you know, Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So as you breathe, begin to create the space between your inhales and your exhales. Pause and create that space after your exhales. Feel that emptiness inside. And when you take the breath in, see if you could bring in different vibrations back into your system. So you're not just repeating the same habitual frequencies. Change it a little bit. But as you breathe out, acknowledge. Maybe even say it out loud as you breathe out what you're feeling. You might be feeling anger. Then utter that out. Anger. I'm angry. The feeling that you're feeling is the anger. So allow that to breathe out. And take in a different vibration back into your system. Not trying to replace the feeling that you are sensing right now, but to soften the landing a little bit. Maybe you're feeling anxious, anxiety. Maybe there's some fear. Find that pause in between. That's when you get to tap into that inner refuge. It's your inner strength, inner light when you pause. And continue to name your emotions if that feels comfortable. Maybe it's the same layers and layers of anger. That's okay. Be generous with your emotions. Less judgmental. Less trying to fix it. Be generous. Be open, wide with it. Like the ocean, you become the ocean. And what you're doing is that you hold the space of this gigantic pool of water, ocean. Vastness of emotions and vastness of experiences. You can hold all that. And at the same time, you're noticing different storms and waves. So ask yourself, what are some of the waves that stirred you up? What are they? When do you get stirred up? When do you see the storms forming in the vastness of the ocean, which is you? You hold both. You're not just emotions, you're not just the waves that stir you up, but you're also the vastness of that ocean. So stay with the waves as you exhale. Almost like you're creating waves, like you're blowing into the ocean, creating that waves. Then you pause. And then you recognize the vastness of the ocean as you breathe in. You're so much bigger than the individual waves. Yet you are the waves as well. So back and forth, back and forth. It's like tightroping between the vastness of the ocean and the individual waves. And I'm going to read a quote from Teresa of Avila. And it was actually from the book, The Interior Castle from Mirabai Star. It says, this magnificent refuge is inside you. Enter. Enter into that space. Shatter the darkness that shrouds the doorway. Step around the poisonous vipers that slither at your feet, attempting to throw you off your course. Be bold. Be humble. Put away the incense and forget incantations. They taught you. Ask no permission from the authorities. Slip away. Close your eyes and follow your breath to the still place that leads to the invisible path that leads you home. Close your eyes and follow your breath to the still place that leads to the invisible path that leads you home. And then begin to notice your breath calming down, noticing possibly the storms have subsided a little bit. Maybe not be completely. And that's okay. It just is. It's just what it is. We're vulnerable and we're courageous. Often people say, you're so sweet and you're so feisty. And that's where I would like to stand. We're yin and we're yang. And within the yin, you'll see the yang. And vice versa. And I'll hand it back to Chris.
Let's just take a few minutes to follow some of the comments that have been shared. And again, this is a place where we are acknowledging, we are listening without judgment. Collectively, we are strengthening our individual fragility by holding together this space. So Eileen shared earlier, I'm feeling great sadness since this conflict started. I know that I was present during the Holocaust. This is reminiscent of that experience. And she said, Masami, the area that you described under the heart has been very sensitive and painful. Now I understand and let it go. Thank you. So thank you for sharing that, Eileen. And that helps us to feel the human experience that you've had and how that's being stirred up right now. Diana says, Putin shows us what having no empathy, no heart capacity looks like. Evil personified. Our collective hearts are breaking open to heal. Personally, my Latvian ancestry is super activated, and it is all I can do to clear the energy. Thank you for sharing that, Diana. Carol says, experiencing sorrow and apprehension over current events. Also, feeling sadness that I'm unable to step forward and make a difference. And Carol and anyone else who might be feeling that, this is something that Masami and I were talking about quite a bit yesterday, that when we are faced with these kinds of traumatic experiences, it's normal for us to feel the urge to go out and do something, to change something, to take some kind of action. And it's very natural because that's actually how we help protect ourselves from injury. It's how we survive the conflict. And yet, even though that's an important part, the surviving, it's equally important to let the vulnerability in. And this is what Masami was pointing us to earlier in that meditation, is we need to be able to hold the extremes. And so at some point we have to surrender to the feeling that gets stirred up and let it play itself out. However that might be. For some of us, it might be a shaking or clenched jaw. It might be crying, sobbing. It might even be hysterical laughter. But we need that as well, because that helps us to close that circuit. It helps us to close that process of receiving hurt, letting it wash through us. Then we actually get to transform it and send it back in another shape. And that's what really the power, in my view, of love that we talk about really is. It's our ability, our capacity to offer what we have to offer, whatever that is right now. And it may not seem like it's much, but it's still powerful. Mary Sue says, frustration and confusion. Can't we just learn from history that this darkness hurts so many people? That's a challenging question for all of us, I think. I feel it personally. What am I doing? What am I not changing? What am I being stubborn about or resisting that's causing me to repeat behaviors that are hurtful to myself and others? Sally says, I've been feeling overwhelmed and exhausted. Thank you for your reviving meditation, a refuge for me. I'm grateful to be part of the collective fragility you offer. And thank you for acknowledging that, Sally. Some of you may even be feeling physical sensations. I can tell you that I had a strange day of it yesterday, where the entire left side of my body, all of the old injuries that I sustained to that side of my body were lit up yesterday. And not surprisingly, it was after spending a period of time reading through the news and what's been happening, both in the tragedy unfolding in Ukraine and also the crushing repercussions that are hitting the people in Russia. Carol says, I light a candle every night at dinner in recognition for those in Ukraine and asking that this madness ends soon. I might just want to see what feeling that stirs up, hearing that wish for the madness to end soon. Claudette says, I send a silent prayer to, I'm missing a word there, to a Ukrainian, an inner light of hope that they may feel loved. I think we understand the sentiment there, Claudette.
Chris, I think I want to add a couple things, and then I would love to hear what others are feeling and think about this, but it's really hard to talk about it this way. So, I've been like struggling to even mention it right now or to say it, but it's the oneness, this idea that we're one. And which is, I think it's the cosmic truth, that we are one is the cosmic truth. That is the cosmic law, the universal law. If that's the case, as hard as it may feel to all of us to have to stop in our own tracks and say, that means there's a part of me that needs to be looked at, that has the darkness in us too, darkness in me, that I do have the essence, you may want to call it. I don't know exactly what to call it. It's really hard for me to even talk about it, but that Putin's action is also in me because we're one. So if we as a spiritual community is going to stand up to the cosmic law that says we're one, then we must look at our own darkness too. And that's probably the hardest thing. It's hard to look at the mirror and the reflection in the mirror and say, wow, that Putin's action, whatever drives him, you may not take that action yourself, but whatever that is underlying drive behind that, his actions also are in you, in me, in me. I am Putin. And I am the soldiers that are volunteering to fight against Russian military tanks and bombing. I am the refugee that is fleeing the country to Poland and other parts of the world. I am the child that fled Vietnam and drowned. And I am the Japanese soldiers that killed all these people and raped them in China. I am the one that received 2 atomic bombs. But I am also the one that dropped 2 atomic bombs to the country that I was born into. And we have to have that courage to hold that. That's what love is. And, you know, I came across this quote by David White. He said, "Courage is what love looks like when tested by the simple everyday necessities of being alive." Courage is what love looks like when tested by the simple everyday necessities of being alive. So it's one thing to look for love and to light for the light, but the depth that you can go in creates the vessel for you to hold love and light. And that's what I've been contending with within myself, is that I am that evil man, as well as I am the person that is wanting to do some good and to tapping into my courage, which will show up as love. And, you know, I think that might be the hardest lesson right now for all of us. So when will we learn from this? You know, Mary Sue, I don't know the answer, but what I can tell you is that when we begin to see and live from the true meaning of oneness, not outside of us only, but within ourselves, that's when I think we can begin to finally change the composition of the soil that we live on. So, and I posted earlier the quote that I read that I just messed it up completely. So, Chris, if you don't mind rereading Teresa of Avila's quote about your basically refuge, your inner refuge. That's something you want to cultivate, everyone. I've done a lot of work on cultivating inner refuge, and I've done a lot of recordings on that in the past couple of years, but it's about knowing where can you find your equilibrium? When can you find the strength and love and the healing at the same time? Where is that like for you? Is that in your own space when you're playing piano? Maybe it's when you're with your puppy, maybe with your kittens, maybe with your grandkids. Maybe you're on the walk and you find an oak tree where you can sit by. But it's the inner refuge you have to cultivate. So if you don't mind, Chris, rereading that, because I totally botched that one. So thank you.
Okay. This magnificent refuge is inside you. Enter. Shatter the darkness that shrouds the doorway. Step around the poisonous vipers that slither at your feet, attempting to throw you off your course. Be bold. Be humble. Put away the incense and forget the incantations they taught you. Ask no permission from the authorities. Slip away. Close your eyes and follow your breath to the still place that leads to the invisible path that leads you home. And if I could add, because it's somewhat in answer to the question that Mary Sue raised of when we'll learn or how can we learn, I'm going to go back to John O'Donohue again for a second. He says, invoke the learning of every suffering you have suffered. Invoke the learning of every suffering you have suffered. Close your eyes. Gather all the kindling about your heart to create one spark. That is all you need to nourish the flame that will cleanse the dark of its weight of festered fear. And I know we're about at our time right now. We still have comments coming in, and
that's okay. Let's just go for a couple more minutes and let's read some comments as well. And everyone, I'll just read just like a maybe first couple lines of the Rainier Maria Rilke's poem, and it's called "Let This Darkness Be a Bell Tower." It's a gorgeous poem. Let this darkness be a bell tower. Quiet friend who has come so far. Feel how your breathing makes more space around you. Feel how your breathing makes more space around you. Let this darkness be a bell tower, and you the bell. As you ring, what batters you becomes your strength. As you ring, what batters you becomes your strength. Move back and forth into the change. Move back and forth into the change. What is it like, such intensity of pain? If the drink is bitter, turn yourself to wine. If the drink is bitter, turn yourself to wine. I'll read the rest. In this uncontainable night, be the mystery at the crossroads of your senses, the meaning discovered there. And if the world has ceased to hear you, say to the silent earth, I flow. To the rushing water, speak, I am. So we're all flowing in this history together. Be the bell, be the bell. Let that bell ring. Because in that we find our courage and strength. And the true meaning of oneness, which is still very hard, everyone, for me. To think that I have that darkness in me. I may not start a war, but I certainly start a war within me pretty often. Things I say to myself is pretty awful at times. And there are times I say things that are just beautiful moonlight. It's so sweet. So delicate what I say to myself too. And we hold that. We're in the tightroping together. So find the generous heart in you. Find the ocean in you to hold much more than your anger and your overwhelm and your frustrations. Hold those things too, but also hold human capacities to heal, come together, and to believe and live from the place of oneness. Maybe read a couple more things and then we'll wrap up for today. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I will start with Eileen's comment. She just said, thank you for your raw honesty, Masami.
Of course.
And And Lynn says, thank you for sharing yourself with us. Yes, it feels like a tightrope. Love to you both. Davia says, yes, Masami, I struggle with how to think about current affairs in the world. I believe we are all one and are capable of evil as well as good. We do have a choice. When I think about our choice being under our control, I feel grateful for many choices I've made in my life. I sometimes wonder what choices I made in lifetimes past. Love to all on this call and all in the world. Deja says, you didn't mess up that quote at all, Masami. It touched me deeply when you read it.
Thank you. Thank you. I was glad that Chris could reread it for us too. So
Carol added, my deepest suffering taught me the power of forgiveness. Diana says, when you work through the gamut of, or the spectrum of good and evil actions, you can choose what spectrum you live from. We choose our vibration.
and that's the thing, isn't it? That is the art of living. And I think that's the part of the fragility, is that we're never stationary in one emotion either. We're never stationary in the same frequencies of the light. We are changing and shifting with the light every day. So that's when you catch yourself and you say, okay, come back to, what is my refuge? Where's my inner refuge? Where's my inner equilibrium? And that's what you're doing. Yeah. And it's a choice. It really is a choice.
So remember the power of blessing that you hold inside of you, that is so long forgotten for so many of us. And remember that the antidote to the times that we live in, where survival breeds scarcity, that you can counter that with being generous. And there's so many ways of being generous. And sometimes it's just listening. Sometimes it might be opening up to other people. We're not all in Poland or Hungary or Bulgaria or countries that are taking in the refugees from this current conflict, or the many other conflicts that are trying to hold the flood of people that are running from terror and conditions that can no longer support them. But what we can do is we can offer what's within our domain to offer. And Pauline said, we are beginning a new Power of 8 group to plumb our depth together. It is our 4th group, Powerful. And for those of you not familiar with the Power of 8 work from Lynn McTaggart, that's a way that she has scientifically measured the impact of groups channeling their combined intentions toward an object or toward an outcome. And it's been shown that we can do that. We can combine together this collective fragility that we're talking about here and turn it into a strength. And we can literally change our world from inside and out together. So there are many other comments that we didn't make it to today, but I know that we should probably, in the interest of time, start to close.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you to all of you who shared and we read, and those of you who shared that we didn't read, and know that for each one of you and everyone who's on the call can see the chat, and for all of us to engage with that together, it brings us closer as human beings. It increases our capacity for compassion and for recognizing the humanity in each other. And it gives us more access to the gifts that we have to offer, that we can use to counter this fear and scarcity that drives the violence and hate that we see in so many places right now. So thank you for showing up and
And I wanted to just read, Carol said, thank you both for cracking over my weary heart. The tears are flowing. Open, she says. Yeah, you know what? Let your heart crack open. Let your heart break with what's happening. Don't be afraid to let your heart break in it. I think we get too timid around it, and we don't let our hearts to really make the sound and cracking. That's what we need. We can't skirt around emotions anymore. You know, dive, everyone dive into the depths and the widths and the wisdom of all your emotions. Be the ocean, be the ocean, be courageously contagious with your generous heart, and listen to other people's thoughts, feelings. This is happening to all of us. It's not, this is good, this is bad, but it's impacting all of us, all of us. So let's keep that in our hearts. And we'll be sending you email about the Saturday's musical prayer that Chris will be taking us through. So please look for that email. By probably tomorrow, we'll be able to send that. So, okay, good, Chris. Anything else?
I just wanted to say that the line that comes up for me, it's a Sufi teaching. It's echoed by a lot of different Sufi teachers over the millennia. And it's that the only way to open your heart is to let it break. And this is a time to not resist letting it break, because there's so much, that's where we can tap into what we have to offer. Okay.
And you don't have to be a singer to join this musical prayer. Early on, there was a question about that. You don't need to be a beautiful singer or anything. It's a form of expression, form of singing the prayer together. So hopefully you can join, and we feel good that we can offer that. So thank you so much, everyone. Namaste. And then we'll be together soon. Much love to you.